I am very confident that you are aware that trust in our democratic institutions is at a historic low, and the judiciary has not escaped that criticism. According to Gallup, just 35% of Americans in 2024 expressed confidence in the nation's judicial system. That is the lowest level the organization has ever recorded. That skepticism cuts across political lines, and it marks a whopping 24% collapse in just 4 years. Let me put that in perspective. That is one of the steepest declines in trust in the courts Gallup has measured anywhere in the world, not just the United States. Similar drops were recorded in places like Venezuela and Syria and Myanmar. Many Americans say the people who run our institutions have become distant from the people that they are meant to serve. And yet, in this moment, the federal courts are one of the few parts of our government that is still holding the line. While Congress, particularly Republicans, has largely surrendered its role as a check on this president, federal judges have again and again stepped in to block some of the administration's worst impulses. Remember, it was the courts that halted deportations carried out without hearings. It was the courts that struck down one by one the executive orders punishing law firms for representing the president's opponents. It was a federal judge, it was just 2 weeks ago, who blocked the president's attempt to seize control of mail-in voting before the midterms, stopping the Postal Service from carrying out changes to its delivery of mail-in ballots. Another judge stopped the administration from building a national voter list. And another one blocked Trump from requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote. That judge's exact words were, quote, "The Constitution does not grant the president any specific powers over elections." And how about just last week? A federal judge ordered the Pentagon to stop requiring government escorts for New York Times journalists visiting the building. And this is just a small list. Time and again, when this administration has overreached, the judiciary has stepped in to safeguard democracy. That role has made the nation's trial judges something that they were never, ever meant to be, the front line in some of the biggest constitutional disputes of our time. These are not Supreme Court justices issuing landmark opinions months after the fact. These are federal district judges, often acting right away, within days or even hours, deciding whether an executive order can take effect, whether a single deportation can proceed, or whether a federal agency has exceeded the authority Congress gave it. That has put an extraordinary amount of attention and pressure on judges who traditionally worked far away from the national spotlight. Think about it. Courtrooms that once handled disputes with little public notice have become the places where some of the country's most consequential constitutional questions are being tested in real time. And for doing these jobs, what happens? Many of these judges are paying a steep price. President Donald Trump routinely calls judges who rule against him crooked. Todd Blanche, then the Justice Department's number 2, now its acting head, spoke of waging, quote, war against so-called rogue activist judges. And the threats have followed. Last year alone, the U.S. Marshal Service investigated a record 564 threats against federal judges, roughly double the number from just 5 years ago. Some judges have even received anonymous pizza deliveries to their homes, which might seem innocent or innocuous, but it sends a message that says, you know what it says? It says, we know where you live. So now a group of judges who spent their careers speaking only through written opinions has decided that at this moment in time, in this place, silence is no longer an option. In the days following America's 250th birthday, they have launched a bus tour through communities across Pennsylvania and Ohio and Michigan, too. They're calling it Justice in Motion, and they want to chat with you about why the rule of law matters. They are stopping at libraries, look at them, at schools, at diners, at farmers markets. As the organizers put it, courts, quote, cannot remain abstract institutions disconnected from the people they serve. Judges don't usually do this. They decide cases, they write opinions, they rarely step into public debate, especially in groups like this, dressed as they are. What is happening is so unusual and so important. The tour is inspired in part by something that happened thousands of miles away. When political leaders in Poland began weakening judicial independence, judges there did something remarkable. They left their courtrooms and they traveled town to town explaining in plain language why independent courts matter in a democracy. Now, a group of retired American judges believes this country may need that same kind of civic conversation. It's amazing. Courts can issue rulings. Judges can interpret the law. But the rule of law ultimately depends on something that no court can order: the trust of the public, the trust of you. And when the public conversation about the judiciary is dominated by one Donald Trump, judges who remain silent, as we generally expect them to, they're at a disadvantage. Judicial restraint may protect the integrity of the courts, but it also allows Trump to distort the conversation. So this morning, we will speak with one of those participating judges about why they believe defending the rule of law means meeting Americans where they are, in those libraries and diners and schools and community centers, on Main Street itself. I am joined now by Justice Victoria Roberts, a retired U.S. District Judge for the Eastern District of Michigan and one of the judges joining the Justice in Motion tour. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Jacob, and thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm amazed by this whole undertaking. What compelled you as a retired judge to go out and talk to people, particularly when your safety could be on the line?
Jacob, I and 30 other judges who participated in this 4-day bus tour are really compelled by many of the instances that you just alluded to, and what has happened to those judges as a result of the rulings that they have made. We have the example of Judge Boasberg in Washington, who made a ruling concerning El Salvadorian immigrants. We have Judge Reyes in Washington, who made a ruling concerning the status of Haitian immigrants. And both of those judges have been subjected to calls for impeachment. They have been threatened, and they are just two of many, many other judges who have been threatened either by physical violence, with hate mail, with packages sent to their homes. And we thought that it was important, since we are retired and since we do have our First Amendment rights restored to us, that we can be the voice of those judges, the voices of those judges who cannot do this themselves. We ourselves sat in those seats. Many of us received threats, and we know how it feels. And so we are very sympathetic. We are very empathetic. And we want the public to know that the response to judicial decisions that they don't like is certainly not to call for the impeachment, and certainly not to call for violence against those judges for merely doing their jobs.
Well, I often wonder what it must be like to be a Judge Boasberg and receive these ad hominem type of attacks. Only you would know, having sat in that same position. How badly do you think they actually want to speak out, but can't, and have to rely on you all at this time?
I would think that the urge would be pretty high. And so we know that those judges are merely doing their jobs, that they know that they can only speak through their opinions. They can't respond to an article that's in the paper. They can't respond to President Trump on social media. And so because we know how that feels, and because we can do it, we are doing it on their behalves.
To people who say, you know, this is political and judges are supposed to stay out of political conversations, you say what?
I say that it's not political at all. This bus tour that a number of judges have been involved in for the last 4 days. It started in Western Pennsylvania. There were 2 stops in Ohio. It ended yesterday in Michigan at a library right outside of Detroit. That was all motivated by simply our desire to work on behalf of these judges.
It's not lost on me, though, that those are all battleground states.
Well, I didn't pick the states, and I'm working through an organization called Keep Our Republic and Democracy Rising. And under the auspices of Keep Our Republic, there is a group called the Article 3 Coalition, and we are all retired federal judges who have tried to exercise our rights now that we have, that our sitting judges don't have. We didn't pick the states. And I can tell you that Keep Our Republic and Democracy Rising are both not partisan. They're not bipartisan. They are not partisan organizations. And we have judges of both parties appointed by presidents of both parties who are active participants in both of these organizations.
I often remind people that the judge who stopped the family separation policy in the first term, Dana Sabraw, from the Southern District of California, was a Bush appointee, a Republican, who called that policy one of the most shameful chapters in the history of our country, and said it shocked the conscience, which is why he put a pause on that policy and ordered the reunification of the kids. And that is about the rule of law. And when people hear the rule of law, though, on this tour, I can imagine for many people it can sound abstract, whether they're in a diner in Ohio or Michigan or Pennsylvania or whatever. How do you explain to them why the rule of law matters in a concrete way?
Well, we tell them the rule of law simply means that judges have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That is really our rule of law, the guiding principle for everything that we do. We tell them that the rule of law means that in a particular case, even a case that they may bring into a court, that judges are required to look at and examine the facts of their case and apply the rule and apply the law that applies. And there's law that applies in every single case that is filed in court. There's a case, there's a controversy, and people have the right to come into our court and have that controversy handled and judged. It is only the blockbuster cases that get national attention and that get press coverage. What people don't appreciate is that there are thousands and thousands of cases that are filed daily in courthouses across this country. And judges like me are handling those disputes, whether it's a dispute over a landlord-tenant matter, a divorce, a contract, a trademark, a patent. And people need to know that we are handling disputes that touch their lives, not just these big cases that have national attention. And we want them to know that in all of those cases, judges intend to be true to the rule of law, which is to put aside any bias that they may have and to look at that case and to make a decision based only on that case, on that person, without regard to their position in life, without regard to wealth, without regard to whether they are somebody indicted for a crime or a president of the United States. It's not supposed to matter. Maybe there are some exceptions to that, but it's not supposed to matter. And we are supposed to make rulings that are neutral without regard to position in life.
I have to tell you, it was kind of weird to see all of you walking in those robes on city streets. You know, when you think of a judge, you think of them sitting behind their desks in the courtroom. What was the reaction of people who saw you all on this tour out and about in this way? A bunch of judges just walking down the street like we're looking down the screen.
Exactly. Well, I joined the tour in Michigan, so I wasn't a part of that, but I certainly am very aware of what the reaction was to the public or by the public to seeing those judges who really mimicked a tour in Poland, as you talked about, called the March of 1,000 Robes in 2020. And what we wanted to do was remove the barrier of the bench. That's what I call it, the barrier of the bench. Most people are never going to get inside of a courtroom. And most people don't want to be inside a courtroom. They don't want to have an issue that would take them that far. But we wanted to come from behind the bench and remove that barrier and let people know that we're just part of their communities. We're citizens just like them. But we've taken a very important oath that we take seriously. But we did want to demonstrate that we want to meet you where you are. You're not all going to come to our courthouses, but we want to meet you in public squares, in libraries, in restaurants, in bakeries, which is exactly what these 30 judges did over the last 4 days.
You all might make good MS Now correspondents. Take it from me, who has been in many of those places all around the country and the world, talking to everyday people. It is enjoyable, and in all seriousness, I really admire what you and your fellow justices have done. Justice Victoria Roberts, the former federal district court judge for the Eastern District of Michigan, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.